episode of Beyond the Present podcast. I'm Daniel Morgan, and today we're talking about how we can change your relationship towards the news and ideally stop following up with it altogether. You see, guys, we live in a world of 24/7 news cycle. This means that all the time you're receiving headlines and tweets and updates and this and that. And most of the time we want to stay, current. We want to somehow focus on what we got right now. Oh, what's happening here? What's happening there? And so on. But the problem is when you are overly obsessed with the consumption of the news out there, you forget about the most important news in your life, which is your news. You see, in life, you either constantly look out for what's the news out there, or you make the news in your own life. And today, it's my aim and wish to help you understand why you should focus on making your own news and not just watching the news. So guys, what does that mean when I say make your own news? Right now, when you open the headlines, anything, whether it's the New York Times or a newspaper, some tweets, whatever it is, you feel like that, I want to get to know the world. What's happening right now? Inflation, the wars in this country and that one. You see, the fact of the matter is that 99.9% of all the news that you ever hear will have zero impact on your life. You're saying, well, no, Dan, we live in a big world. It's like a global village, and everything affects everything. So it's like a butterfly effect where it's going to affect our lives. Let's face the facts. If you're now listening to me, you probably have spent many years following with all sorts of news, the headlines, the breaking news, this and that. But be honest with yourself. How much of those news that you consumed actually had a direct, relevant impact on your life? When you look closely, realize there is no point in following up with what's happening in that country over there or in this situation. And even sometimes economic news won't really affect your personal economy. You see, when you look at most people's lives, because you're saying, well, Dan, at least let's talk about economic news. They're talking about inflation and blah, 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 all those things. Well, the fact of the matter is that your personal economy, in most cases, has nothing to do with the economic news. It means people who are wealthy generally tend to stay wealthy in both good and economic times. When things are bad, when things are really tough economically, they're still making money. Now, the question is, are they making as much? Maybe they'll be making a little bit less money, but they're still rich and getting richer. And the poor people just keep getting poorer no matter what happens to the economy. If the economy is doing well, they're doing poorly. If the economy is doing bad, they're still doing poorly. You see, knowing about the economic news or the latest political trend and whatnot, none of these things will actually have a real impact on your personal life. Knowing why this person there just had a major affair, or that politician almost had an impeachment, and then in this country there's a war going on and there was a terrorist attack in that part of the world. How does any of this ever affect your personal life? Why should you care about who is the next winner of this prize? And I mean, in reality, when you think about this, you have to, understand that news has one slight disadvantage over other forms of entertainment. And yes, I use the word entertainment here. You see, when you're watching a movie, when you're, randomly browsing through some reality TV and whatnot, or just go on social media and swipe through the stuff, you tell yourself, well, I'm just trying to, let off some steam, trying to have some fun. But when you're watching the news, sometimes you feel like you're doing something useful. Like, listen, man, I'm trying to find out what happened to that, missing airline and whatnot. The fact of the matter is that the majority of the news will almost never have a direct impact on your personal life. So why bother following with all that negativity? Because as you know, the news media, it's obsessed with the promotion of all sorts of news that tends to arouse a lot of negative emotions. And the reason is very simple, because bad news generates more views than good news. It's a simple fact. If they talk about these horrific, scary things, you are going to be paying more attention than if they talk about the good news, which means the news media by default is biased towards the negative because they have to survive. You see, the news media is a business like any other business, or at worst, they're actually a propaganda tool sponsored by, certain types of organizations. So either way, when they want to, judge their level of success, whether as a propaganda tool or as a business, they need one thing and one thing alone: more views. And that is exactly why the news media tends to be extremely biased, and they tend to focus mostly on the negative news. They want more views. They want more attention. That means when you're following with the news, you're actually not getting the gist of the latest things that are happening. Because 99.9% of the things that happen will never get reported. No one's going to report how your weight is gradually going up year after year and that you could actually face with diabetes. No one's going to report that someone in your family has experienced disheartened feelings, and if you don't take action, you might actually have some relationship problems. No one's going to report that you're not working hard enough or have not taken the time to plan the year ahead. No one's going to report that, if you're facing with financial problems, the chances are you're not financially intelligent enough or you're not working smart enough to be able to generate more income. You see, no one's ever going to report all the good things that are happening in the world, like all the scientific advancements, all the medical advancements, things that allow us to, live a better life. No one's ever going to report all the good things that are happening to the world. That, little puppy that got rescued, or, the fact that, globally speaking, despite all the problems, the average life expectancy is going up year after year. No one will ever report that literacy now is no longer an issue worldwide, and most people around the world are now educated. No one's going to report any of these things because no one's going to pay attention. So they have to focus on the negative, which means when you're following with the news, you're not really up to date. You're not keeping up with the Joneses, and you're not necessarily aware of what's happening. Instead, you're merely being entertained by an organization designed to attract feelings from their viewers. So please understand that the news is not a reflection of the reality. It's rather a tool for attracting attention. It's more like an entertainment business. And because of that, you will almost never, ever know what's happening out there by turning on the TV and watching the news or checking the news on social media or online. None of that stuff truly is information that is valuable to you. And I say that as a person who works in international business, who has to be, aware of the latest global trends, politically, socially, as someone who actually needs these types of information to make decisions in our organization, I still believe that even for someone like me, 99% of that news is completely irrelevant, let alone somebody else who just spends their time working in a certain career, an artist or somebody else. So in such a world where the news is so negative and it is primarily a means of attracting views, you have to change your relationship with it. I understand that if you want to make the most of your life, you have to either completely stop watching the news or make your news consumption selective, industry targeted, and specific. Avoid the major headlines because the major headlines are not designed to, number one, inform you. They're not designed, number two, to make you feel better. And number three, they're not relevant to you. So why begin your day going through the headlines and feeling all negative? I've been following the news across multiple nations, continents, and news sources for the past probably 10 years, partially because I have to, be aware of certain things that I have to make decisions about our international ventures. But I can tell you this, I have not ever so far seen a single source of news that was positive or reassuring. And it doesn't matter what country I go to. Some countries are doing really well. Some countries are doing really poorly. Some are doing quite, in the middle somewhere. But the news is almost always negative in all of these places. How is that possible? You see, once you have that kind of reference point, then you realize, oh my gosh, there's something wrong here. Because, when you talk to, for example, some people in some of these countries that are not doing as well, they say, oh man, you guys back in the West got it all figured out, I guess. Things are probably good, right? Look at our news. It's always negative. You say, wait a minute. And then you switch back to the European media and they realize, oh man, you guys got it so much better in the other parts of the world. Europe is falling apart. It's all bad. When you watch the headlines, it's always negative. Then you move towards, North America. Then you move towards South America, then Asia and Japan. You realize it doesn't matter where you go. The news is always negative, but that's not true. You see substantial differences between these countries and their economies and their social lives and their, political, basically structure, but they're always always negative. That means that if you want to truly understand the news, you must simply shut it off, because there's no way for you to get the real news through the news. Instead, what I recommend is to make the news. What does that mean, to make the news? It means get so busy engaging with the world around you, building up your networks, starting to talk to more people, bringing more people into your life. And believe me, they will tell you all the news you need to ever know about that country, that location, that city, that neighborhood, whatever it is, the industry. So to make the news, you have to stop following with the headlines and instead go out there, build a lot of contacts, and let the environment inform you of what's happening. That's a far more efficient way to go about than to ruin your mood and start your day going through all these negative headlines that almost always demotivate you. You see, in the same period, 2007, 2008, when the entire economy in the U.S. almost collapsed and the news was always negative, there were many entrepreneurs making lots and lots of money. Why? Because they were not following the headlines, getting demotivated and just quitting their businesses. They were the ones who were out there doing business, and guess what? They got the business and they were successful. So the problem with the news media is that it's a demotivator. And as you guys know, motivation is a key component of success in life. Without enough motivation, you will not have sufficient dedication to make it happen. And that is exactly why from today, I want to encourage you. If you are serious about motivation, if you're serious about hard work, if you're serious about getting the results that you want in life, and above all, if you're serious about actually knowing what's happening in the world, then you should probably reduce your consumption of the news media to an absolute minimum, ideally with the help of filters and search engines and whatnot to make it very tailored and specific to your industry or to your life. And instead, start making the news. Start going out there and start trying to learn about the world in its true holistic form and not its exaggerated, biased, negative version that is portrayed in the media. Understand this. The news is not education. The news is not information. News media are there to entertain you and to get you hooked on the next breaking news. Once you know that, you will then change your perspective and realize the way to be informed is not by following up with the latest news, but by reading more books, attending more conferences and seminars, connecting with the people around you, having more conversations. Even if you're someone who, I'm not academic, I don't want to go to seminars or read books. Doesn't matter. Start talking to the people around you. Start interacting with them. That process gives you more information than passively consuming this biased thing we call the news. All right, guys, that's all the time we had for. Hope you guys will then make some changes to your life and reduce or even sometimes eliminate the consumption of the news and make sure that you are truly informed about what's happening and ideally start making the news yourself. All right, guys, that's it. Have a very good one. This is Daniel Mulligan, and this was Beyond the Present Podcast.